So today let's talk about factoring polynomials. Now hopefully a good amount of this will be review, but if not, then hopefully it'll be something that'll be easy for you to pick up. Well, first of all, let's talk about factor. One of the things that you need to understand is anytime that you're asked to factor, when you are asked to factor, it's assumed that you're going to factor completely. Meaning that there's going to be times when you factor something and then you're going to be able to factor one of the factors that you just came up with. Similar to like reducing a fraction. If you reduce a fraction once, you might have to reduce it a little bit more. So the assumption is that when you're asked to factor, you have to factor completely. And the other thing is that if it doesn't factor at all, we're going to use the word prime to describe it. So let's talk about, just jump in here to problem number one. Number one is a good example of monomial factoring, meaning that I'm going to look at all of these terms and I'm going to determine a monomial that I can factor out. So as I look at this, I notice that in terms of the coefficients, 3, 15, and 6, I can factor out a 3. Now with my variables, I notice they all have a's, and they have at least a squared, so I'm going to take that out. Now b's, they don't all have b's, so I can't take a b out. And they all have an x, so I'm going to take an x out. And then what do I have left? Well, let's see. If I take a 3a squared x away from 3a squared bx, all I have is a b left. Here, if I take a 3 out of 15, that means there's going to be 5 left. If you take a squared from a to the third, you have an a left. If you take an x away from x, you don't have any of those left. Minus 3 goes into 6 twice. If you take an a squared from a to the fourth, you have a squared left. And then if you take an x away from x, you don't have any left. So there you go. And that's monomial factoring. Now, the big factoring we want to talk about, though, is trinomial factoring. This is a major part of advanced algebra. So as I look at this trinomial right here, what I'm trying to determine is what are its factors. Well, its factors are going to be in the form of two binomials. And there's a couple tricks out there that I'm sure if you looked up you could find, but we're going to try and get through this somewhat logically. And so what we're going to do is this. We're going to try and figure out what goes inside here. Well, it's fairly easy in that the numbers or the terms that go in the first spots here are always the factors of this term here. So the factors of x squared are just x and x. And then the factors that go, or the terms that go here, are the factors of this number. Now this number has factors 2 and 2 and 4 and 1. Now, how do I know which ones to use? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to use the pair of factors that add up to this term right here. So that would be 4 and 1. Okay, now if I do it right, then a couple things should be true. One is that this times this, x times x, should equal this, x squared. 4 times 1 should equal 4. And then also when I multiply the inside terms, and then the outside terms, they should add up to the middle term. And so I did it right. And then also, how could I go through and just double check if I was really anxious about it? Well, you could just simply FOIL or distribute back. So if I did that, x times x is x squared, x times 1 is 1x, 4 times x is 4x, 4 times 1 is 4. If you add those together, and there you go, I did it right. So let's try another one. What about this next one? X squared minus 8x minus 20. Well, again, I'm going to start out with my parentheses. Factors of x squared, again, are x and x. Now, factors of 20 we're going to use are going to be, well, you have choices. You have 1 and 20. You have 2 and 10. You have 4 and 5. Okay? Now, as I'm looking at those, I need to come up with factors that are going to add up to negative 8. Well, you got to remember it's negative 20, so that means one of these factors has to be positive and the other one has to be negative. So as I look at that and I think about one of them being positive, one being negative, then I would go ahead and I would use these two. And I'm going to make this a negative. So if I do x minus 10, x plus 2. So did I do it right? Well, check. These two is multiplied to be negative 10. These two add up to 2x, which add up to negative 8x. There you go. So I did it right. Now, it's not always that easy. It gets a little more challenging. So let's think about here. So again, I'm going to set up my parentheses. Now the difference here, though, is now you have to use factors of 6 and factors of 4 that are going to add up to 11. So you got to think of factors of 6, 1 and 6 and 3 and 2. Factors of 4, 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. And now we're going to try and combine them together so that they add up to 11. So thinking about this here for a second, what I would probably use, sometimes it takes a second to kind of think it out. Alright, so I would use 3x and 2x. And then here, I would use 4 and 1. Now, how do I know? Because again, if I multiply these two numbers, you get 2x. If I multiply these two numbers, I get 12x. Well, that adds up to 14x. Now, is that 11x? No, that's not. So, we know we did something wrong. So maybe I just need to switch my numbers around. So let's try it again. I'm going to put it over here. 3x, 2x. What if I put the 4 here and then the 1 here? Now if I multiply the inside numbers, I get 8x. Multiply the outside numbers, I get 3x, which add up to 11x. So I did it right this time. Okay, and that's going to happen where you go through and you think you have it, but then you do a check and you're like, oh no, I made a mistake. So then sometimes you have to flip around numbers, sometimes you got to try some new pairs, things like that. Okay, let's try the next one. So this one, as I'm looking at it here, one thing I notice is that every term is divisible by 3. So I'm actually going to factor out a monomial. I'm going to take out an x squared. Okay, now that's nice because now it's a lot easier. Now I have to figure out factors of negative 8 to add up to 7. So I would do this. So I do x plus 8, x minus 1. And again, if I at middle is 8x, outside is negative x, add up to 7x. Okay, so far so good. Well, let's keep moving.